some kind of mental illness to push against that, to go on stage and just bomb horribly and then still do it because you love it. You just have some really deep desire to make it work. And actually, it's usually the comedians that start awkwardly and badly who end up being interesting. The guys who, from my experience, when I've seen people show up and from the first day on stage, they're just easy, like really amiable comics who just know how to talk to people, they don't usually end up being that special. They get some quick success, but they don't usually turn into something like really unusual and great.
Do you remember your first open mic night? Was that how you started? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'll never forget that.
Can you tell us about it?
Well, I got this. I found out that you could do there was an open mic night at a club in Boston where I started called Stitches. And I was actually like 17, almost 18 years old. And I thought, geez, you can go on stage. They said you do 5 minutes. You just put your name in a hat and you get on stage. You can be anybody. That was so exciting to me. So I went to this club Stitches, which is very grown up. They didn't even want to let me in because I was underage. And they have a drinking, a liquor license. And then I went on stage and I did about 2 minutes because I didn't have enough material. Like I sputtered, my whole throat constricted, and I heard this roaring in my ears. My eyes were watering. My heart was pounding and I couldn't control myself. I couldn't think straight. And all these adults, like drinking adults, were looking at me like I'm an idiot. And I just walked off stage to kind of confused, like, little applause. And I just felt like a pile of garbage. And then I kept doing it.
Okay, so you did really terribly on stage.
Yeah.
What made you think, I need to do more of this. I want to get back on there.
Well, I didn't do it for a little while. And then at the time I was working at a video rental store in Newton, Massachusetts, where I grew up. And Kevin Meaney, who was a very big star in the Boston comedy scene back then, Boston had a very strong local scene. And I knew who Kevin was. I heard him on the radio and stuff. And Kevin was a customer at the store I went to, that I worked at. And I told him that I had done an open mic. And he said, oh, well, you got to come on my show. He had a show that was a huge, him and Steve Sweeney, these two great comics. They had this show where they would, they'd pack the room and put on all the best comics in Boston. And he said, come be on my show. And I said, well, no, I'd need to practice, do more shows to get good enough. And he said, no, I won't let you go on my show unless you go on now. He said, it's interesting because you don't know what you're, like, it's comedy tragedy. He kind of wanted me to go on and bomb. And so I went again into Stitches, and it was a Wednesday night. It was Sweeney Meanie night. It was jam-packed. And I went on, and I think the audience, people's mouths were open. They were shocked at how bad I was. Just shocked. And I got off stage, and Kevin wouldn't look me in the eye, and nobody would. And it was just the most pulverizing humiliation. It was much worse than the first time because it was a really, the first time was an open mic night. The premise of the show is that most of us don't know what we're doing. But this was a professional comedy show. And I went on it and just flailed. I mean, it was a nightmare.
So was Kevin Meaney cutting you a break or being really cruel and putting you on after that?
That's open to interpretation. I don't know. I mean, he must have known how bad it was going to hurt me. But to me, I think he was giving me a break. It was up to me to make it into something. Who knows? Maybe I could have. Maybe I was funny. He hadn't seen me. Do you know what I mean? So he was giving me a chance. He was it's interesting when somebody becomes an agent in your life for a minute. You know what I mean? And they go, well, let's see what happens if you do this now. It was a formative experience. Sitting here now, I'm very glad I had it. It was
Why?
A great, great thing. Because it gave me a really realistic, shocking picture of what I was facing. That show that I did and that audience and that night, that was still the terrain that I work at today. I think if you're just looking for easy ways or you're looking for victories through life, I don't think you're really getting much out of it. I think you have to, if you really know how hard stuff is and despite that you extract some tools out of yourself, it's better for you. And the next time I went on stage, I was very wary.
So what was the first time when you felt like you started to understand who you were on stage and like what your onstage personality was going to be? What your, persona, if I could use that word, was going to be? Like what the stage version of you was going to be.
The first time I went on stage, I did kind of offbeat and weird jokes just because I thought that you might as well try being more like what makes you laugh. I did really well. My third time on stage, I had really big laughs. And other comedians came up to me and said, "Hey, you're funny. You got something." And I was so excited that I had a little foot in the door that this is something I could maybe do. And I thought it's me being kind of weird the way I am in real life. I like to say things that don't make a whole lot of sense or surprise people a little bit. But then I got seduced by getting big laughs, and then I just started doing. Once you get laughs, you're like, "Oh, I'll do anything for that feeling. That feels really good." So then you start thinking it's just jokes.
So the first time you were on stage and started doing jokes where the comics were coming up to you and saying that was good, you've got something. What were you doing? What is it that you were doing on stage that they had a positive reaction to you?
I was doing more kind of contemplative, weird jokes. I don't think I did things that were self-reflective. I did things that were just like, well, one of the bits was about street signs that I thought they should be punctuated because I got confused by them. Like signs like, "No, you turn," "Drive slow, children," that kind of thing. It was just taking these street signs and reimagining them. And that was an offbeat, funny, silly bit. And it made people laugh. And that's the only one I remember from then now.
When did you start talking about yourself, being self-reflective as you described it?
I think when I don't know, once I was in my 20s, I had grown up so much on the road because I started doing stand-up so young. I didn't go to college. So my formative years were being on the road, which meant I had a lot of embarrassing sexual stories because I didn't have a girlfriend all those years because I was on the road. I was traveling everywhere. And also I was doing a very unusual thing. I was doing stand-up when most people my age were in college. So I was an odd fit with everybody around me. So I started telling stories that were like confessional about strange sexual situations I'd been in. I think that's when I started to enjoy confessing and putting myself out there. But then, but I also talked about things like, the absurdity of being poor and trying to have money in the bank and stuff like that. So it was about life in general. I think it's when I was married and had children that I started to really talk about my own life and what my life felt like.
But before you realized how being a father would give you material for your comedy, did you think, okay, I'm going to be a father and now it's over for me? No more independence, no more easy life on the road, the door slamming shut?
Well, there's always a give and take. I was glad to let go of some of that. The road really sucks when it's all you have. It's really sad. It's very lonely out there. So I was happy to be in a family and be married and everything. And when I first got married and had kids, I thought, I had some friends I played poker with on Mondays, and I thought the poker game on Mondays that's the water line. Like if I don't make that game, I'm losing something. I'm losing something if I don't make it to that game. It means I'm letting go of my youth, I'm letting go of my manhood, all these things, my independence. But then after a while I realized, why would I want to go play poker with a bunch of guys in a smoky room when I could be at home with my family? And I realized that a lot of the things that my kid was taking away from me, she was freeing me of. A lot of things that men hang on to when they're younger, they're not good for you. And that there was this huge pride in having a kid, and also that I didn't matter anymore. The greatest thing about having a child is putting yourself second in your own life. It's a massive gift to be able to say that you're not the most important person to yourself.
Why is that a good thing?
Because you'll always, I don't know, because that's always going to let you down. You know what I mean? The idea of I've got to get me right. I've got to get what I want. That's got to be right. That's never going to quite work. Life just isn't that satisfying. But if you can be useful to somebody else, that you can actually accomplish. You know what I mean? You can go, I did a pretty damn good job today as a dad. Pretty good. Best as I could. That's worth so much more. You know, I saw a movie once where Spencer Tracy catches this woman about to kill herself. It's a pretty dark movie for the time, but I forget the name of the movie. But Spencer Tracy's on a boat, and he sees a rich young girl about to throw herself off the boat because her fiancé left her for another woman. And he's trying to talk her out of suicide. And he says to her, do you have a job? Do you have anything that you do in your life? Which was a funny thing to ask because she's like a 1920s, she's like a socialite. And she said, no. And he said, I think you should get a job because it's very hard to be sad and useful at the same time. And ever since I saw that, I keep that in my head. If you can be useful, which means to somebody else, not to yourself, if you can be useful, it just makes you feel better. So I live in service of my kids, for that's the first priority. And then things like my career, they feed into that. They're part of that because I'm providing for them. But also, it's just not that important. If something's not important, it's more fun. It's more something you can look at from objectively instead of having it be this albatross around you. I've got to get this right.